Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Hebba Youssef.
Treating people like the adults they are when it comes to business, bad news, I think is super important. It is valuable also to not lose that sense of joy and fun in doing that. And I think that's when you think about like an internal comms and the narrative arc of internal communications, when you're delivering bad news, it's important to not try to make the bad news seem less bad by like making shit up, but putting the bad news into context. So like the company is really struggling. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. And oftentimes the what you know is like, we have this many more months, or the holiday party is not being canceled, or you're not getting your bonuses. And here's why. Serious. Like, that's where leaders get into trouble, is when they say they find out bad news and immediately go to tell people instead of thinking about, how do I want to deliver this message?
Welcome back to another episode of the I Hate It Here pod. Today we're talking about one of my favorite things ever, pop culture. But obviously I had to somehow make it about HR, so here goes nothing. Joining me today is Kim Roher. She's the Chief Creative Officer of Peak HR. She's worked at various other tech companies in the Silicon Valley area. Kim, I feel like, I don't know, what else do you want me to tell people about you?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. Anyone who's watching the video version of this will see the like pure and utter chaos that's behind me. I don't know how much you can actually see because Riverside does this very nice crop while we're chatting with each other. But when I first logged on to this, I was like, oh, good God, everyone can see the complete trash fire that is my living room. So for all you folks out there with young children who are listening, who are in the last final weeks of summer, I don't know when this is going to air, but hopefully by the time you listen to this, your kids are back to school. You're in some sort of a routine. Maybe your house isn't being destroyed every day. I wish this for you. I hope this for you. It's been a long summer.
It's so fascinating you say that, because like as a kid, there's nothing more you want than summer. And now with all my friends who are parents are like, I hate summer.
Well, there's the lyric in It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Christmas. It's Mom and Dad Can Hardly Wait for School to Start Again. And as a kid, I was always like, well, whatever, the song. And now it's like my favorite lyric in the history of lyrics.
I love that.
I mean, it's just the summertime chaos. Like there's no time to do anything. So that's what people should know about me, is that my brain is about as cluttered as my house, which is recovering from multiple trips and preparation for a school year to begin. A school year for which, if I may rant for just a moment.
You may. Welcome.
This is pop culture relevant because it's relevant to our new vice presidential candidate.
Oh.
The system that we have in this country for childcare, school, and work is completely and totally fucked.
It's
fucked. I think this is the first time I ever came on your podcast. We were talking about parenting and child care, all this stuff.
Yeah.
So there's no system for supporting parents who need to work later in the day, like past 2 p.m. School ends at like 2:30 for most parents. And then you're on your own to find out what your aftercare programming is going to be. And our school starts in a week. Still don't know if we have any aftercare for both of our children. It's a complete and total clusterfuck. But our vice presidential nominee has a track record of supporting parents and creating things like free lunch programs and paid parental leave. And so I'm like, for the first time in my adult life, I have a little bit of hope for the future for working parents.
That's a really good place to start this episode. We're going to talk about pop culture, but I love that first rant.
I've been seeing all of these wonderful like TikToks and things about him just being like, hey, look at this thing he did for families. Hey, look at this thing he did for families. And it makes me happy to have potential people in the White House who give a shit about education and children and parents.
Okay, Kim, I am asking every single guest this season, before we get to the pop culture stuff, I know how excited you and I are both to do this. I've been asking every guest this season because my whole focus in the newsletter and on the pod is relationships, which is funny because I picked this pop culture episode to talk about HR's relationship in the world and pop culture. But tell me one thing that you believe is key to maintaining strong relationships at work.
there's two things. It's a combination of low ego and low bullshit.
Love it.
Because I think there's all these things that would like trust and empathy and like all these things that are so important. But if you're doing like complicated social dynamic ego drama, or like you're not listening, like just cut the bullshit and just say things to people a way that they can understand you and be real with each other. Like,
it's so funny. You're like the third woman to say, I think, no ego.
Okay, this is, again, it's like everything comes back to parenting. But when you think about the mental load that you carry navigating fragile male egos, what if you didn't have to expend all of that energy at work navigating stupid bullshit like whether this dude is going to be mad that your idea was better? Like, how much more of your brain could you use?
So much more.
Like, this is one of the greatest things about working with Morgan and Catalina at Peak is that we spend absolutely zero time like fronting with each other or like putting on airs or like trying to appear in a way that will appease some, like we just don't do that shit because we're three tired women who don't have time for that. And like our work is better, our work is more fun, our work environment is better. Like it's the best workplace I've ever had.
I love
because
that.
We don't care about all bullshit. No, like I just want to hire all of our friends someday when we have millions of dollars and can do things like that. Because I want all of you to experience what it's like to work someday with these magnificent women.
We're going to manifest it. We manifest everything. Okay, but thank you for sharing low ego. I'm going to keep that in mind as we think through the themes this season. But today...
I was like, as we think through the HR and pop culture,
as we think through HR and pop culture, we're going to talk a lot about ego. Get ready. Okay, so I tried to pull together some pop culture examples. I also sprinkled in a few surprises for you, Kim. So I hope you're ready to laugh and have some fun today. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is probably referenced most often when people say HR. It's The Office. So there's this commonly known HR reference thanks to Toby Flenderson. But if you haven't watched The Office, let me summarize it in 60 seconds or less. It's a mockumentary-style sitcom, follows the day-to-day lives of employees working in Scranton, Pennsylvania, at a branch of a paper company called Dunder Mifflin, and it centers on a endearing and sometimes very annoying regional manager, Michael Scott, who has an unconventional leadership style that often gets him into kind of awkward but really funny situations. So we had 9 total seasons. We saw personal and professional relationships, office politics, and some deeply absurd corporate culture moments. And I want to talk about that.
Importantly, it's based on a show that originated in the UK of The Office.
Yes.
It's like we don't even have time to get into.
I might be a bad Office fan because I've never seen the UK Office.
I think if you've watched a lot of the American Office and then you go back to try to watch the UK Office, you're like, but this isn't the show because it's a different show. Like the first episode or two, you're like, oh, I see how we took that and turned it into what The Office is here. But it's totally different. It has British sensibility and it's a totally different work environment in the UK than it is with the US.
I love British sense of humor. Every Brit I meet thinks I'm so funny.
Well, I mean, obviously.
I mean, I wouldn't agree with that, but they seem to think something is endearing about this. Okay. My favorite episodes of The Office. If you hate The Office, I'm really sorry. We're just going to talk about it for a little bit. I have a coworker. She does not like it. She has been like, it's so awkward. I hate it. Throughout the entire show, Toby is somewhat of a voice of reason as he tries to manage Michael's antics, even though Michael's like openly hateful to Toby. First of all, let's just start there, Kim. Why is he so hateful towards Toby?
Well, okay, I didn't even think we were going to like pull out my dramaturgy background for this, but let's talk about literary tropes. With Michael Scott as an anti-hero figure, like he needs a foil. He needs a punching bag. He needs somebody to be quote unquote worse than him, but who actually isn't worse than him. Because always like with an anti-hero, you need them to hate somebody that the audience reasonably would be like, that person's actually not so bad. It's like a way that this trope works. So I think that's, stylistically, story-wise, like that's why Toby and Michael need to have this dynamic. I think in the universe of the show, I think Michael hates Toby because he thinks Toby's the fun police, and Michael Scott doesn't give a shit about propriety or rules or leadership, like that's actually like real leadership. I mean, there was what's that line? I haven't seen this in so long. But there's when he says, I don't want people to hear me. I want them to be afraid of how much they love me. There's a great Michael Scott line about this.
Do I need to look this up right now?
Maybe.
No, I don't know it. Who do you think I am?
I don't know. You just said you had a favorite episode. I don't even remember.
I do have a favorite episode. Hold on. Let's see. Would you rather?
We're just going to argue about if we like The Office.
They're going to be like, we hate this episode completely. Okay, hold on. He says, would I rather be feared or loved? Easy, both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me.
Yes. And so if that is your goal as a leader and as a manager, you're fucked already, right? So to Michael, like everything he does is in the spirit of getting people to love him, which is a horrible way to live your life. And I feel for him and his unresolved childhood traumas that like not resolved, but get addressed over the course of the seasons of the show. Like not in any real meaningful way. Let me be clear, in a comedic way. Like, I feel for him. I know managers. I have worked with fucking managers who, like, their primary MO is, I just want people to like me. I want people to love me. I can't deliver this bad news. I want my team to love me. It's worse when it's, like, the CEO, because that, like, then that trickles down to everything. But in the best scenarios, you use your HR person as a coach and as a sounding board and as a partner to help you deal with those feelings of abandonment and wanting to be loved, and recognize that like your role as a leader, as a boss, is not to satisfy the needs of your poor inner child that needs to be loved. And like you do, like when you get to like just this side of therapy and you're like, here's a script to take to your therapist. Here's what I want you to work on in therapy this week. Yeah. I am not a therapist. But instead, Michael Scott, because he and Toby butt heads.
Yeah.
He just sees Toby as killing all the fun, and you just don't want people to love me, and you just don't want us to have fun. And once he has crossed that line into this is who Toby is, then Toby is a two-dimensional person to him, and frankly, for a lot of the show, to the audience. And I used to get really mad when I started out in HR. I was like, everyone's hating on Toby. Toby's just trying to like keep the place from burning down. Like, if I were Toby, I would be fucking miserable too.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Well, to be clear, this might be a hot take. I do feel empathy for Toby, but I also think he's like the worst HR person ever. He just lets Michael walk all over him. He doesn't push back. It's very much what I think the rest of the world thinks of HR. And then when you're really doing the work, you're like, wait a minute, no, I'm absolutely pushing back. I'm absolutely yelling at leaders who are doing wild and crazy things like outing their employees, which was an episode of The Office.
I mean, you gave some examples to me like to think about when we were prepping for this. And those are like, things like outing an employee, things like blatant sexual harassment. Like these are things that happen on the show and you're like, they're played for comedic effect. And Toby is like, oh, you shouldn't do that. And then he goes like, it's all comedy, right?
Yeah.
But I think even more harmful and more troubling are all of the little things that don't get blown up into like a conflict between Toby and Michael. Like all the shit that happens with Pam and her job and how her job changes throughout, where she's like the secretary, but then she's asked to do all this other shit. Or receptionist, sorry, not secretary. And then when she's just like, I'm going to be a salesperson now. I'm a salesperson. Pay me more. And we're supposed to be like, yeah, go Pam. Good for you. But my little HR heart is, I was like, this is not how it works. You don't get to just like decide like I am on your side. I support you. Like you've been treated wrongly, but also like, where's Toby in all this? Or I don't know if it's Toby or Holly at that point. They're both bad HR.
They're both people. There. Yeah. They're both bad. I mean, Holly ends up with Michael. So like that in itself it's interesting. Cause like the entire, when I watch it from like a fun perspective, I'm like, haha, funny. And then when I watch it from an HR perspective, I'm like, this is my worst nightmare. Like every episode, I'm like, that's the 10th HR.
And do you feel like this is just making us look bad? This is making people think bad things about HR.
We already have a perception issue. I've talked about that quite a bit. My first episode this season with Chris Hagood, where we talked about HR's perception. And I'm like, yeah, we have a perception issue. And then it's made worse, honestly, in art. Like you don't ever see the HR person being like this savvy, smart, business-minded,
I want that
professional.
show.
I want that show. This is that show. That's you and this is the Kim and Hebba show.
This is our show.
This
yes,
is our show.
I just no, like I want to ask ChatGPT if they can give me an example of a show where HR is like good.
Yes, our new game also, I have a segment this episode called I Asked ChatGPT, and then we find out what ChatGPT says. Okay, yes. So Toby, some examples. You made the right examples where we talked about sexual harassment, the gay witch hunt. Are you done asking ChatGPT? Did you get it?
I am done asking ChatGPT, and I have an answer that I had not thought about.
What do we got?
Donna Meagle from Parks and Recreation.
She's not really HR, though.
She's not HR, though.
She's like their office manager. I tried to figure out what role she was.
What is her job?
I don't know, but I love Donna.
What's interesting is ChatGPT also suggested Ron Swanson because he is technically in charge of the HR operations. Okay.
Wow.
I mean, I guess because he's in charge of the whole office. And honestly, a lot of things he does on Parks and Rec, I'm like, yeah, I can see that. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say he's a good HR professional, but I don't think he's supposed to be. I do think it's funny. That's the only example that ChatGPT could come up with, though.
I love that. And they're all The Office, Parks and Rec, and isn't The Good Place all the same?
Yeah, same showrunner.
So I want to go with that for 1 second. So The Office, Parks and Rec, and The Good Place are all the same showrunner. Very interesting because in The Good Place, I love The Good Place. If you have not seen it, I don't want to. Maybe I shouldn't spoil it for someone, but I do think it's really funny because there's a lot of trickery in The Good Place, and I'm like, hey, maybe we don't trick our people. Like,
that show has a lot of really interesting workplace dynamic stuff in it that I wasn't expecting.
Same
in later seasons where you're seeing like the bureaucracy, and still HR is always painted in such a bad light. I really do want to I don't know who wants to watch it besides HR people. Like, I want a show about workplace dynamics where HR is fucking good at their job and helps people.
But I just gotta say, is that going to be entertaining at all, Kim? Like, what I will give pop culture and how they portray HR, as deeply angry as it makes me, at least I'm entertained.
True. Maybe I'll ask. My sister is a writer, and she writes 30-minute comedies. I'm going to ask my sister. She does spec scripts sometimes where she'll write a spec script for A Good Place or a 30 Rock. I am going to ask her if she wants to write me a workplace comedy with good HR people.
And then we can read it live on this podcast. You and I can play act every character. She actually was working
on a script that's about, it's sort of like Parks and Rec-y sort of vibe, but it's about the national park system and park rangers. Maybe I should ask her to be an official advisor for her HR character.
I love that. Oh my God, that'd be so fun. Okay, so that was
I'm going to forward her this podcast because the representation of HR in pop culture sucks.
It's terrible. So we talked about the bad times. Michael was truly horrible, where if you're wondering what episodes those are, season 2, episode 2 is a sexual harassment episode where Michael continues to make inappropriate jokes and says that's what she said. And then season 3, episode 1 is Gay Witch Hunt, in which he outs a fellow coworker. And it just really shows his understanding and lack of sensitivity regarding actual personal privacy and issues that the LGBTQ plus community face in the workplace.
I love how seriously, though, we're but Michael Scott, did you know that he is a sexual harasser? Doesn't even realize it. Did you know?
Did you know he has undiagnosed childhood trauma? Okay, so the one I do want to talk about, listen, I have this other thought a-brewing in my head.
Keep us on track, Hebba.
Yeah, this is for another day, but I have this theory, as awful as Michael is, he does have the core of being a good leader.
Yes.
There. He cares deeply about these people he works with, sometimes a little too much. He actually wants them to have fun at work, which I think is just completely missing from modern American corporate workplaces. People have forgotten, I don't want to show up 8 hours every day and be bored out of my mind. I want to have some fun with my coworkers. We have a motto at Work Week, it's make work fun. That's what I think about. He actually made work fun. So there was one example I pulled out of him actually being a good manager. And it's season 6, episode 10. He does this murder mystery episode. Essentially, the company faces a potential bankruptcy. And instead of Michael talking about the bad news, he decides to distract the employees by playing a murder mystery game throughout office hours. And some would actually see this as his refusal to address serious business concerns. But I actually thought it was like a way to alleviate employee stress and
It's a yes
maybe
and.
improve.
It's a yes
Yeah,
and,
there we
Hebba.
go. What do you think? We're faced with bad news. What should a leader do?
Well, when faced with bad news, good God, I think leaders need to, again, I think it's a little why not both. Because the thing that drives me nuts about leaders, especially leaders who are on that spectrum of like, I want people to be friends with me, I want people to love me, they're afraid to deliver bad news because they don't want people to be mad at them. But what happens is they couch the bad news in a little good news sandwich, or they try to hide the bad news. And eventually it all comes out. And then trust has been lost. And people don't like you anyway because you lied to them or you hid things from them. And your people who work for you are grown ass adults who understand that they work for a business. They understand that they are not your children. And this is not a family. That treating people like the adults they are when it comes to business bad news, I think is super important. It is valuable also to not lose that sense of joy and fun in doing that. And I think that's when you think about like an internal comms, like in the narrative arc of internal communications, when you're delivering bad news, it's important to not try to make the bad news seem less bad by like making shit up, but putting the bad news into context. So like, the company is really struggling. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. And oftentimes the what you know is like, we have this many more months, or the holiday party is not being canceled, or you're not getting your bonuses. And here's
More
why.
serious.
Like, I might be misremembering this episode, but I feel like he distracted people with the murder mystery deal because he didn't want to give them the bad news. But I might be remembering this wrong, but I feel like he also didn't have the full news to tell them, or like he didn't know all the details yet. Because I think that's where leaders get into trouble, is when they say they find out bad news and immediately go to tell people, instead of thinking about, how do I want to deliver this message? How can I deliver it compassionately with the appropriate context, with some level of reassurance, if there's reassurance to give? You know, if it's like, we're going bankrupt, we have a month to wind down operations, like, you can't really sweeten that up very much.
Yeah, no.
I feel like as an employee and as an HR leader, I feel like employees deserve that level of respect of being treated like adults and not being treated like children that need to be distracted while you give them a shot.
There we go. That's the hot take. I loved it. Okay, that's all for The Office. So if you hated The Office, you're in luck because we're moving on. We're moving on. It's okay.
We'll put this in the show notes. This is where the Office talk stops.
Office Talk stops, but I just highly recommend everyone watch it. My favorite episode is Stress Relief, which is in season, I'm trying to remember, I think it's in season 6. Yes. It's in season 5. My favorite episode, if you're ever wondering, is in season 5, and it's called Stress Relief. It makes me cry every time I watch it. When I'm in my very deep and dark, sad, depressive spirals, I tend to watch The Office because it's stupid and makes me laugh. Okay, Kim, your example. I gave them The Office. What are you giving us today?
I am giving Silicon Valley.
Oh, God.
Well, I know. So context for this, because I love context. I did not watch Silicon Valley for like the first 2 years it was on, the first year and a half it was on, because I worked at a small startup of about 20 people in San Francisco. And all of my bros were watching it, and they'd come into the office and laugh about it. And they were talking about it. And I was like, this is too close to home. I don't even want to know about this show because I do this all day. I don't want to go home and do this for entertainment.
Yeah.
And then it might have been after we got acquired and we were like bigger and I wasn't as like in the shit all the time. No, it might have been. I don't even know when I started. Anyway, I started watching Silicon Valley at some point while I still worked for this company. And then I could talk to my coworkers about it at lunch, which was nice. But I was watching it with this like deep, anxious pain in my chest because almost I couldn't even give you a single episode. Almost every single episode, I was like, if only they had an office manager. If only they had an HR person. Why?
Yeah.
Like every moment of the show. And the thing that was interesting to me about this show, which I still remember this, I haven't seen it in years, but the thing I remember is for the first like 50, 100, like they hired employees pretty quickly once they reached a certain point. And it was past the point where most Silicon Valley tech companies would have brought somebody in, like a very junior office manager who's expected to also do HR. Like that character that was so ubiquitous in Silicon Valley in real life and in San Francisco in real life. I knew literally thousands of people who had that job in companies that were like Pied Piper, and yet there was zero representation on the show. And that struck me as very a big oversight for them, because this is a character that would have brought in a different type of audience. And like, I mean, you know this, like the office manager, HR, do it all person is like I said, it's a ubiquitous role in the tech industry, and especially in the time period that this show is happening. And there were so many plot lines where I was like, well, if you had your HR person here, that wouldn't have happened. And maybe that's why they didn't do it, because then they wouldn't have had those plot lines. But I mean, for a show that felt so realistic and hit so close to home, that piece of it, I was like, well, once you hit 50, your investors are going to be telling you that you need to have an HR person. So like, what's going on here? That's so unrealistic. I thought you guys did your research.
It felt so real. Watching the show, I was like, ugh. I have yet to rewatch it because
feel
mostly
like parody. It felt like a documentary.
It felt very real. Like, I think that was why it popped on the scene and it was so popular so quickly.
Yeah. Well, and because for people outside the industry, it feels like this overblown sort of farcical nonsense. But if you're in it, you're like, it's like that. I could have written that plot line based on last week at work.
Yeah.
But there was a point at which they had somebody who was doing operations, HR kind of stuff. I can't remember. Of course, it was a woman, and she was like really buttoned up, but in that like Silicon Valley business bitch sort of way, not like in a Toby sort of way. And they didn't give her enough to do. And when she came on and she was like, I'm going to handle these employment contracts or these like equity negotiations. And I was like, yeah, HR people represent. And I was like, that's what you gave us? Okay. Yeah. But there's like the examples that ChatGPT gave me around like how an HR person could have helped. There's the like Richard and Ehrlich founder drama, which like that takes me back to so many executive level founder drama.
I want the burn book of Silicon Valley. Like, who in HR?
Kara Swisher has written
is
a book,
writing,
but it's not about HR.
Oh,
I want to read. I haven't read it yet.
I might have to read it. Is it about founder drama?
Silicon Valley. Yeah.
I mean, it's about like,
Kara Swisher knows everything. She's got all the secrets. She's like,
give me the tea, girl.
With her big hair.
I'll have to go read it.
I just got it. Maybe we could do a little burn book. I hate it here. Burn book reading club.
Yeah, I would love that. Okay, so
anyway,
what else?
The thing that cracks me up is ChatGPT is like, a good HR person could have mediated these conflicts by facilitating open communication, setting clear boundaries. They could have organized team building activities to foster better relationships.
Shut up.
Okay, ChatGPT. Okay, sure. There's some of these issues that around employee turnover and morale. They said the team at Pied Piper experiences significant turnover, with key team members leaving the company due to various issues, such as a lack of clear direction, poor management, and stressful work conditions. And then it's like, here's what you could have done if you had HR. Just, implementing feedback mechanisms, conducting exit interviews, improving the work environment, career development plans. Like, none of this stuff is rocket science. None of this is new. This is like the same shit we've all been saying for years and years and years. But like, I keep saying, like, I want the representation in a show where like someone is coming in and being like, hey, our employees seem to be leaving. Here are the reasons people are leaving. What are we going to do about it? But you're right. Maybe like I'm not the one to write it. I'm not entertaining enough to make it funny, like in a script writing way. But
the interesting one is have you ever seen Billions? I've only ever seen like the first 3 seasons, I think.
No.
They have this role where I think she's a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist, and she is internal at their investment fund or venture back. Someone's going to yell at me about getting this wrong somewhere, but she plays the role.
I learned this from another podcast. This is where you invite the audience to write in and tell us where we were wrong.
Audience, tell me where we were wrong. Anyways,
audience,
Wendy,
tell us where we were wrong.
They're gonna be like, you just messed up the whole plot of the show, and I'm gonna be like, not surprised. I've seen three seasons, so that should really tell you a lot about my attention. Wendy plays the role of a performance coach, so she's there because the role that the people are doing at work is very intense, and they need to be able to go to someone to like help them from honestly like a therapy perspective. And I was fascinated because I was like, I would love that role. Like I would need to go back and get my degree in doing it. But it is really interesting because a lot of the things we do in HR, I'm not going to say is therapy because I think that's offensive to the people who went to school and are trained. Yeah. I don't want to be offensive to the people who went to school and trained to handle situations, but it's therapy adjacent where we're spending a lot of time telling leaders like, here's how your unconscious bias is showing up, or like, here's why you don't yell at people, and here's how to have a stronger relationship with X, Y, and Z, and like, here's a better way to give someone feedback, and no, you can't fire them because they're not performing. You need to go tell them the expectations for them to perform. So I saw that role on the show, and I was like, yes, she's a badass. Like, obviously, I've not seen past season 1 or 2, so please don't write in and yell at me about this, but she seems to like have the respect of everyone at the organization.
Season 3, she like takes off her mask and everyone hates her.
And it's like fired or something. I don't know. Season 1 or 2. But I just loved that role because one, she was a badass in the show. She was clearly respected. She clearly operated from like a high level of autonomy and confidentiality. And I was like, that's what I want to see. But she's labeled a performance coach. She's not HR. She's a performance coach.
Kind of reminds me of like the therapist on Ted Lasso, like having a team therapist. That's not your coach. It's not your manager. It's like a neutral, safe space. This is why everyone needs therapy. Honestly, like,
everyone. We can figure out how to do that.
When I worked at Oyster, we had a paid therapy benefit through a company called Plum. It's like for, virtual telehealth. There's lots of companies that offer that. But the thing that I really liked about our policy was that we covered 4 sessions a month for employees. So you could have weekly therapy paid for by the company. Because we're like, it's not forced to use it. You don't have to use it. We only get data on like what percentage of our employee population is using this and like how many hours a month are people using, but no personally identifying anything. It's just so important for people to have an outlet at work to help them, like, not just have to be at work, like a work sponsored outlet, a work sanctioned outlet where work is saying it is okay to need help dealing with people shit.
Yeah. Life.
And here is how we are providing you space for that. Peopling is hard, man.
It's so hard
to people.
I know.
Can I tell you I have a disappointing human resources in pop culture because
Hit me.
Do you know the show Big Mouth? Like animated, gross show, but it's about like middle schoolers going through puberty, but it's for grown-ups. It's very much adult humor.
I did not like going through puberty, so I would like to not rewatch it again because I was an awkward, knobby, neat child who didn't understand anything.
This is what it's about, but from the perspective of a grown-up. Anyway, it's a great show, very funny. But there was a sort of a spin-off called Human Resources, and I was like, "Oh, this is fun. What's it about?" Except it's not really about HR. It's about the department. This very, very small context detail is each preteen, as they're going through puberty, gets a hormone monster that's assigned to them. Their hormone monster is like their kind of invisible sidekick that controls all of their prepubescent hormones. And the Human Resource is a show about all the hormone monsters and their work environment, like being assigned to different children. So it's kind of like an Office style, like animated workplace mockumentary about hormone monsters, but there was just like not enough. It's Human Resources because they are, ChatGPT tell me, it's because they represent human emotions and they work at a company called Human Resources because they are the resources helping humans navigate their lives, blah, blah, blah. I was like, is that appropriation? Might be appropriation.
I don't know. We'll let that be. We'll let it be.
It's appropriation of my department.
Of my department. Nothing, But I will not be watching. I just want to be honest. I will not be watching Big Mouth. I do not want to relive my teenage years.
Fair, absolutely fair. I watched it during.
So weird.
You know what I used? Embarrassing. I used to watch it on the bus because I needed some like downtime. It was my like riding the bus home from work.
Okay, to be clear, I'm not shaming you for watching it. I'm just expressing like I don't
feel
want
shamed.
to.
I feel shamed.
Although on the note of adolescence,
Yes.
this is such a weird story. People listening and be like, "What the?"
This podcast
frick?
episode is fire.
Sponsored. This podcast episode is sponsored by the weird things Kim and Hebba think in their heads. No, I just recently I was on Facebook. I don't know why, because I never use Facebook.
You needed to buy something from Facebook Marketplace.
Actually, I was selling my bed on Facebook Marketplace. Maybe that's why. But then I was scrolling through my Facebook feed because I was like, I haven't been here in so long. What's happening? And I saw my 12th grade English teacher was commenting on one of my old high school friends' post about how they should meet up and get coffee when she's back in town. So then I, of course, loved this English teacher. She was my favorite. No, I loved her. She's my favorite English teacher.
She's good.
She doesn't know I do all of this. She knew I wanted to be a writer, but like I didn't tell her this. And now I'm talking about her. She was a great teacher. Anyways, I then threw my hat in the ring and said, hey, I would love to get coffee with you. So I'm just going to say when I show up and I'm like a full grown adult and I'm not awkward and weird anymore, she might be like pleasantly surprised.
She's going to be like, you really ugly ducklinged yourself out of 12th grade.
I just get better every year. Come on, I was weird in college.
We are like a fine wine, fine stinky old cheese. We're just aging better.
Okay, my last example, and then we're going to have some fun. My last example, I'm wearing a t-shirt.
This has not been fun for you?
This has been so fun. Sorry, we're gonna have more fun. This last example, I don't really know is relevant, but I had to bring it up because I'm wearing a t-shirt. It's a Buffy the Vampire Slayer t-shirt. It's a sleigh. It's my favorite show of all time. I've seen all 7 seasons. I have a book about the philosophy of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So many things. Okay. My only thought was, I don't know how HR would have been involved, but she had a very interesting relationship with her watcher, who was a high school librarian. And then the principal was like kind of mean and bullying her. And not that HR needed to be in Sunnydale and on a Hellmouth because we're already in hell, honestly. Not that we needed to be in a Hellmouth too. No. But I was like, are we going to get some HR up in here? Like, this principal should not be bullying the student. What are we doing here?
Who does HR for the school district? And why are they not involved with Slayer Watcher dynamics?
Because they're too busy dealing with the demons that are trying to murder the students.
But is the school district involved with that? I did not get the sense the school district was involved with the demons.
I mean, the mayor was a demon. Everyone listening to this was like, I've never hated it before. Anyways, we will now be doing an episode later. They'll be doing an episode next season called Buffy's impact on HR. I just had to sneak that in because I'm wearing my Buffy the Vampire Slayer t-shirt. Anyways,
I love it.
Now, Kim, on to my very fun and very cringy thing I did. Are you ready for this?
I'm almost ready, but I had one more thing about
Buffy. Okay, one more thing.
It's about Buffy and showrunners and HR representation.
Okay.
I know. You're like, hold on. So I sit on the board of a nonprofit company called Real Families for Change that is working for 2 things. Better representation on screen for families and caregivers, and more importantly, better working conditions for families and caregivers in the entertainment industry. From talking to people that I know that work in the entertainment industry in film and TV, their HR is like abominable. Like, I hear stories and I'm like, what the fuck is happening there? Both my sisters actually work in Hollywood. And when I hear stories about what they've dealt with from HR teams on shows they've been a part of or at studios they've been a part of, I want to go in and like be a fixer and like go in and like set those HR teams straight. Be like, what the fuck are you doing? So knowing that the writers and the actors and the producers and the showrunners are having bad HR experiences, I think you could pretty easily draw a line to the way HR is represented on screen.
Yeah. Oh, mic drop. Because as you were saying that, I was thinking about the Nickelodeon documentary. Mm-hmm. And then I was thinking about the One Tree Hill women came out and spoke out against their show person.
Do you ever listen to Pod Meets World? One of my favorite podcasts.
No, should I?
If you liked Boy Meets World.
I do love Boy Meets World. Did they talk about that too? So
they talk about their experience being child actors, and also because Danielle Fishel is on and direct and produces Girl Meets World, which has been filmed more recently, she's able to compare the experiences the child actors are having today to what she went through as a child actor and like the lack of protections. And they have guests on, they're talking about like the lack of financial protections, like who's reviewing these contracts? Not a good HR person. Who is supporting these children on set? Who is supporting the adults on set who get fired for needing to take time off to have a child?
Yeah.
Like the workers' comp in the entertainment industry is insane. Like people getting injured on set and like just never being able to work on again. Like it's a crazy world. I mean, that's not even touching the whole area of unpaid internships in Hollywood and like the pipeline. We do an entire episode on how broken HR is in Hollywood.
I was gonna say our HR Hollywood episode next season.
Like knowing how messed up HR is for the people creating this art, it doesn't surprise me that this is the representation of the department in the art.
Yeah.
That's my final piece.
No, there's so many stories about like toxic workplaces and film sets and TV sets. And like, yes, I know these actors are getting paid more money than some of us will possibly ever get paid, but that does not mean they need to be treated terribly at work. Like I think about toxic workplaces and like the knowledge worker space, but who's protecting these like creative people whose art is literally on display for all of us to consume and ingest?
Ryder Strong, my like 12-year-old heartthrob teen idol crush, made a really good point that like actors are getting paid a lot to be on these shows, but there's no like employment guarantee, right? Like he was saying like you might work on a show for 6 months and the money you make on that has to last you 3 years. It's like, yes, they're making shit tons of money, but they don't have job stability. They don't have any like protections if they're not in the union. Being in the union is expensive. Being in the union requires you to work a certain number of hours for a certain type of production to be able to qualify.
Yeah.
Oh, I really want to find this and include it for you in the show notes. But I think it was Jimmy Kimmel, all around stand-up guy. Two of my friends write for him and just sing his praises constantly, where he hired people to work jobs that were exactly enough hours to give them their union qualifications so they could get health insurance. Like, that is what you should do. I want to talk to Jimmy Kimmel's HR person. I should ask my friends.
HR in Hollywood's coming soon. We'll have to do that episode.
We're going to go deep on this.
Audience, if you really want that episode, please write in and tell me you want that episode, and I will make it happen.
And send us your questions. Send us your questions because, like, we know people and we can get answers to questions.
I would love
to do an audience questions about HR in Hollywood.
Yes. Okay. So if you're listening to this, you can email the I Hate It Here inbox and you can tell us your audience questions about HR and we will get them answered. Now
get us back on track, please.
Yeah, get us back on track. To end with a slightly cringe and very fun thing I did today. In a segment I've been calling I Asked ChatGPT. So I asked ChatGPT. How much trouble
will this get us into? Let's find out.
I asked ChatGPT 5 rap lyrics about HR, thinking that it would reference actual existing rap songs.
One of rap's most popular topics, HR.
Yes. I was just wondering. I was like, where is it? We talk a lot about work. Okay, Rihanna and Drake have that work song. She's working late, I mean, like, I get it. So I was just wondering if, there's something out there.
I work late because I'm a singer.
Yeah, that too. I spent a whole week being like, I'm working late because I'm in HR. That's literally all I kept doing for a week to the point where people were like, please stop. This is so annoying. And I was like, okay, I will definitely stop. But instead of ChatGPT giving me existing lyrics about HR, rap lyrics, it gave me an original rap about HR.
No, it did not.
It did. And Kim, I'm going to read it to you.
I can't.
And if you get secondhand cringe, I would encourage you to turn off this episode right now. So here we go. Verse 1. This is so bad.
You did like drop a beat. I was not a beatboxer.
No, I can't believe this is going to end up in the world on an episode and people are going to have to hear me. But I'm just reading ChatGPT's. Okay, ready? HR in the building, setting the tone. Diversity and inclusion, we've grown. Employee engagement on the rise. Building culture where everyone thrives. HR's got the plan. We make it right. From hiring to firing, day and night. Policies tight, benefits bright. Keeping the workplace shining light. I'm not going to read anymore because
This doesn't even scan. My little Shakespeare heart is so sad because I'm like, this doesn't even scan properly. And
it could be because I'm a bad rapper. So then I continued to ask ChatGPT because I did not want I did not want an HR rap. I wanted real rap lyrics. So then I replied in real rap lyrics. And here's what it gave me. It said there aren't many. It said finding rap lyrics specifically about HR is quite challenging as the subject matter isn't commonly addressed in rap songs. Sad. Big opportunity, rappers. However, there are some lyrics that can be interpreted as relevant to workplace themes, including HR principles and leadership.
Ready.
And here are a few examples. We have Jay-Z. I'm not a businessman. I'm a businessman.
I mean, that's a legendary lyric. For many reasons.
It emphasizes, here's what it says. It emphasizes the importance of personal branding and treating oneself as an enterprise, a concept useful for career development and leadership in HR. I kind of like that, the importance of personal branding, okay?
Yeah.
Here's what we got. I'm laughing so hard on this one.
I'm ready.
We have Eminem. Look, if you had one shot, one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, would you capture it or let it slip?
You only get one shot, one chance.
This underscores the importance of seizing opportunities and making the most of critical moments, a motivational message for career advancement in HR leadership.
Let's take our HR career advice from Eminem. Good call.
Next time you are ready to get some motivation, maybe listen to Eminem. Last one, and then we can end this ridiculous episode. Probably my favorite episode I think I've ever done. Lil Wayne. Real G's move in silence like lasagna.
What is that even? Is that real?
Yes,
I don't know.
It's from 6'7"
personally. What does that even mean? Is lasagna silent? Oh, is it silent? The G is silent.
Yeah, okay, real G is moving silence like lasagna. Okay, hold on. This line can be seen as advice for leadership in HR, emphasizing that effective leaders often work behind the scenes, making significant impacts without always being in the spotlight. So remember,
I'm going to hyperventilate over here. I'm having a little bit of PTSD from my very first executive assistant job, where I was told that this job was all about not needing the spotlight. And if you need the spotlight, this job is not for you. And I was just trying to help cross-departmental projects. And they were like, you're shining too bright. Don't dim your light.
Next time, you'll just remember real G's work in silence like lasagna.
They don't, though. They don't.
Okay, that concludes this hilarious and ridiculous episode of the I Hate It Here podcast, where we explore pop culture and how it manifests in HR. So just remember, if you had one shot, one opportunity, would you seize the moment or would you let it slip?
Or would you be like lasagna and quietly hide in the background until it's time to come out of the oven?
Someone's going to call us so cringe for this episode, so I would just like to openly admit I own my cringe, okay? I own my cringe. This episode was something. We really did it.
We really did. This is a perfect follow-up to your quotes in the New York Times.
Oh, yeah, miserable. Anyways, we'll talk about that another day. Kim, how can people get in touch with you? Thank you for always joining me. But how can they find you?
I'm always game for this. You can find me on the LinkedIns. That's probably the best way. I'm also on Twitter at Kim's Kitchen Sink.
And you write a newsletter.
And I write a newsletter. I do. It's called I Care Too Much, .substack.com. I Care Too Much on Substack. Find me all over the internet.
Well,
I'm not hard to find.
Call me, beat me if you want to reach me. I'm killing the references today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you loved this, please write in. And Kim, as always, you are so much fun to have here, and you'll be back next season.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye. Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.